She sent one last text at 10:14 p.m. 3 words, "I trust him." 6 hours later, her phone went silent forever. Her body was never found. But the man she loved was already on a plane to another country with a new name and someone else's money. This is how love became a weapon, and the ocean became a grave. Act 1. The beginning. 0:15 to 5 dawn. Margaret Chen, 53, had spent 2 decades building her Seattle consulting firm. 7 years after her husband died, she was successful but lonely. Her daughter Emma worried she'd forgotten how to be happy. One March evening, Margaret joined an exclusive dating site. Within days, dozens of generic messages arrived, except one. Michael Sterling, 51, claimed to be a maritime consultant managing yacht portfolios. His message referenced a specific quote from her profile about finding courage in the second half of life. He'd read the same book after his wife died 4 years ago. They exchanged messages daily, then phone calls, then video chats until midnight. Michael understood her in ways no one else did. He asked about her daughter, her business, her dreams. He shared stories about sailing, sunsets in St. Lucia, cooking in Monaco. He never pushed, never asked for money. By April, Margaret thought about him constantly. When Michael suggested meeting in San Francisco, she said yes immediately. That weekend changed everything. He was exactly who he claimed, charming, attentive, remembering every detail. They stayed in separate rooms. He never presumed anything. Over 3 months, they saw each other every other weekend. When Emma met him at dinner in Seattle, she pulled Margaret aside. "Something feels off, Mom." Margaret dismissed it as overprotectiveness. By August, Michael invited Margaret for 2 weeks in the Virgin Islands to deliver a restored yacht. The night before her flight, Emma called. "His LinkedIn seems thin. His company has no online presence." Margaret felt defensive. "Not everyone lives online. He's private. That's refreshing. Text me every day, okay?" "I promise. Subscribe, call out." The first 3 days were perfect. They sailed between islands, ate fresh seafood, watched impossible sunsets. Margaret sent Emma photos. "Living my best life." On the 4th night, Michael opened expensive champagne. He had something important to discuss. The yacht buyer had backed out. He'd invested heavily in restoration and was caught in a cash flow problem. Another buyer was lined up in Antigua but wouldn't close for 3 weeks. He needed $45,000 for the shipyard, or they'd place a lien on the vessel. Margaret's instinct was to help. "How much do you need?" "I couldn't ask you." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She wired the money the next morning. Michael showed her contracts and emails. All looked legitimate. A week later, the Antigua buyer backed out. Michael needed another $30,000. That was $75,000 total. "I need time to think," Margaret said. She called Emma from the marina bathroom. "Mom, this is a scam. Get off that boat." "He has documentation." "Mom, please, come home. If I don't help, he'll lose everything." "You're going to lose everything." Margaret sent the second transfer the next morning. 2 nights later, at a private island, Margaret woke at 3 a.m. Michael was on the terrace, laughing into his phone. "Yeah, it's handled. Another 75. I'll be done here by next week." When he noticed her, his demeanor shifted. "Just my business partner. Come back to bed." But his casual tone didn't match the desperate man who needed her money. On their last day, Michael said he needed to fly to Antigua. She should fly home. He'd join her soon. At the airport, he kissed her goodbye. "Trust me, everything will be okay." When Margaret landed in Seattle, she had 17 missed calls from Emma. "Mom, thank God. I hired a private investigator. His name isn't Michael Sterling. It's Marcus Sullivan. He has 3 prior arrests for fraud." Margaret sat frozen in the airport terminal. Marcus Sullivan. Fraud. 3 arrests. The investigator found he'd used at least 4 names in 10 years. Michael Sterling didn't exist. His wife hadn't died. She left him after discovering investment scams. He served 18 months in Florida prison. How much did you send him? $75,000. Margaret filed a police report. Detective Sarah Chen was weary but kind. Romance fraud victims reported losing $1.1 billion last year. These people are professionals. Can you get my money back? We'll try, but honestly, the money's usually gone. Marcus had left the Virgin Islands the same day Margaret flew home. The yacht was a rental. The private island? He'd broken in. He flew to Panama, then vanished. 3 months later, Margaret received an email from Patricia Winters in Charleston. 4 years ago, Patricia met Michael Donovan. Same story, same face. She'd sent him $92,000 before her son discovered the scam. Patricia had found 2 other victims, Linda in San Diego, $60,000, and Caroline in Austin, $120,000. All professional women over 50, all recently widowed or divorced, all lonely. Patricia was working with journalist Rebecca Torres to expose him. Would Margaret participate? Margaret thought about the next woman receiving thoughtful messages, feeling her heart open. She wrote back, yes. Working together, the 4 women weren't alone anymore. Rebecca's investigator, former FBI agent James Novak, discovered Marcus had operated for 15 years, using 20 identities. Then James found something chilling. 3 women who'd dated Marcus under different names had died in boating accidents. 2007. Helen Bradshaw, 51, drowned while sailing with Richard Cole. Ruled accidental. Richard disappeared. Helen had withdrawn $75,000 2 weeks before her death. 2011. Susan Marlowe, 49, fell overboard in the Bahamas with Thomas Reed. Body never found. She'd given him $110,000. 2015. Joyce Kensington, 56, went overboard with Marcus Reeves. Ruled accidental. He vanished. Joyce had emptied a $200,000 trust fund for him. 3 women fitting his profile, all died in boating accidents, all gave him money first, all the men disappeared, James explained. The pattern is suspicious. Margaret felt like she couldn't breathe. Rebecca's article went viral in November. The Maritime Romeo, How One Man Used Love and Luxury Yachts to Steal Millions and Possibly Commit Murder. Within 48 hours, 7 more women came forward. Eleanor Briggs, a 62-year-old former judge, had narrowly escaped. Her daughter's unannounced visit made her cancel a sailing trip with Marcus in 2019. When Eleanor tried to reschedule, he vanished. I was probably supposed to die on that boat, Eleanor said. The FBI took notice. The investigation traced wire transfers to Panama, where Marcus had purchased property on a private island. But Panama doesn't extradite for non-violent financial crimes. Then James Novak found a new dating profile. Christopher Ashford, 53, maritime consultant. Same photos. He was hunting again. The FBI created a fake profile. Jennifer Hartley, a wealthy widow. Within 3 days, Christopher Ashford messaged her using identical opening lines. An undercover agent corresponded with him. Within 2 weeks, Marcus suggested meeting in Miami. He flew from Panama through Mexico City, then chartered to the Florida Keys with a false passport. Customs flagged it. FBI agents tackled him on the tarmac. When searched, they found 3 passports, 2 phones with dating profiles, and a USB drive with files on 30 women, financial information, family details, psychological profiles. Margaret watched the arrest video with Emma. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt empty. Marcus Sullivan's real name was Martin Sokoloff, 57, from New Jersey. His criminal history spanned 35 years. Federal charges: 42 counts of wire fraud, 18 counts of identity theft, 12 counts of money laundering. Total stolen: $3.2 million from 27 victims. The suspected homicides were harder to prove. Evidence was circumstantial. Deaths ruled accidental years ago. Margaret testified on the 3rd day. He destroyed my ability to trust, not just in other people, but in myself. He didn't just take my money, he took my confidence. Patricia, Linda, Caroline, and 8 others testified. Family members of the 3 deceased women testified about suspicious circumstances and vanishing suspects. Helen Bradshaw's daughter. My mother was an experienced sailor who grew up around boats. She never drank heavily on boats, and Richard Cole disappeared after giving one statement to police. Susan Marlowe's brother. Weather reports from that day showed clear conditions. My sister didn't just fall overboard in calm seas, and Thomas Reed took over $100,000, then she winds up dead. Joyce Kensington's son. She withdrew $200,000 for an investment with Marcus Reeves. 2 weeks later, she's dead, and Marcus vanished. The prosecution showed side-by-side photos of Richard Cole, Thomas Reed, and Marcus Reeves, undeniably the same man. The jury deliberated 7 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, victims gave impact statements for 3 hours. Eleanor Briggs spoke last. I believe he intended to kill me. 3 other women weren't lucky. They're dead. He's a serial predator who uses love as a weapon. When Martin Sokoloff addressed the court, he smiled. These were lonely women, with money looking for excitement. I provided that excitement. They paid for the privilege. The money was a transaction, not a theft. The courtroom erupted. Judge Blackwell waited for silence. In 30 years on the bench, I have never heard such callous narcissism. You view your victims as transactions. I am sentencing you to 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Martin Sokoloff was led away, still smiling. Margaret stood outside the courthouse as the sun set. It was over. 40 years. He would die in prison. How do you feel, Mom? I feel like I survived something. That's enough for now. Recovery was slow. Margaret worked with a trauma therapist. She learned what she experienced had a name: betrayal trauma. Martin Sokoloff had identified her deepest need, to be seen and valued, and weaponized it. Gradually, she began speaking publicly. Her shame transformed into purpose. She wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor with information to protect others. The first time she spoke at a fraud victims gathering in Seattle, a woman in her 60s approached with tears. Thank you. I thought I was the only one stupid enough to fall for this. Your story makes me feel less alone. That moment changed everything. Margaret realized her shame could protect others. Patricia, Linda, Caroline, and Margaret formed the Maritime Hearts Foundation, supporting romance fraud victims and funding investigations. Rebecca's book about the case became a bestseller. James continued investigating similar predators pro bono. Margaret recovered $9,000 of her $75,000. The real cost was measured in sleepless nights and broken trust. 18 months after the trial, Margaret received a letter from Helen Bradshaw's daughter, Amanda. My mother would have liked you. She was strong, independent, and lonely. That loneliness made her vulnerable. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you're using your voice. Margaret kept that letter in her desk drawer and read it whenever she felt discouraged. 2 years after the trial, Margaret woke one Sunday morning and realized something had changed. For the first time since the Virgin Islands, she felt genuinely happy. She sat on her balcony overlooking Puget Sound, thinking about everything. She thought about who she'd been before, confident but lost, successful but lonely, and who she was now, scarred but stronger, wiser, more connected to her resilience. When Emma called that afternoon, "How are you?" "I'm good. Really good, actually." "You sound different." "I think I'm finally past it. Not over it, but past it." She had survived. She had helped stop a predator. She had turned pain into purpose. She had refused to let shame silence her. That was enough. That was everything. After hearing this story, what do you think? Was Margaret foolish or just human? Romance fraud isn't about intelligence. It's about targeting emotional vulnerability with surgical precision. Margaret, Patricia, Linda, and Caroline weren't naive. They were accomplished professionals who made one human mistake. They trusted someone who presented himself as trustworthy. Would you have seen the red flags? Could you honestly say you'd have done differently? Think about Helen Bradshaw, Susan Marlowe and Joyce Kensington. They deserved justice and never got it. If someone seems too good to be true, pay attention. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Verify information. If someone asks for money early in a relationship, that's a red flag. Real love doesn't come with a price tag. If you've been victimized, you're not alone. There are resources and support groups like the Maritime Hearts Foundation. Share this story. Somewhere right now, someone's receiving a thoughtful message from a charming stranger. Education is protection. Awareness is armor. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Martin acted alone? Do you believe he killed those 3 women? Thank you for watching and caring enough to make it to the end. Stay safe. The ocean isn't the only place where people disappear. Sometimes they vanish in plain sight, behind a smile, a promise, and 3 words. I trust him.